It is now my pleasure to welcome Erin Battle with the William and Mary Washington Center to the stage for this conversation on diplomatic approaches to security. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I'm Erin Battle. I'm the Associate Director of William & Mary's Washington Center, which is William & Mary's campus in the city here in Washington, D.C. I'm also a two-time William & Mary alumna, and I would be reticent if I didn't mention that. We also have a few Washington, D.C. program students and alumni in the audience, so hello to all of you as well. So while we wait for Ambassador Nuland to get on screen, I will just give you guys a little bit of an idea of what we do in the Washington Center. So our idea of learning is through experience. We really specialize in experiential learning opportunities for students, and that ranges in everything from speakers and site visits to full-time internships. So as you think about ways that you can give back to students and ways that students can have their learning enhanced by professional opportunities, that is what we do. We match them with mentors. We have really structured internship programs so that they are getting a chance to reflect and learn what they may or may not want to do. And we also are really fortunate that the William & Mary alumni community is so giving and is able to hire those students, act as mentors, and really be the reason that our programs are successful. So for any of you that are William & Mary alumni in the room or in any way affiliated with William & Mary, or if you just live in the city and you've been impressed by what's been going on today and you want to get involved with William & Mary, please just let us know. We are always in need of folks to come in and help our students make their way into the next phase of their life. So that's just a little bit more about the William & Mary Washington Center. We're still waiting on the ambassador to come in. Amazing. So while we're waiting and I am killing some time, can we also give our wonderful MC Colleen some props because she has been killing it today. So can we get a round of applause for her? Amazing. One final round of applause, and I think we're gonna probably do this a couple of times, but for those of you that do not know Kay Floyd, who is the head of our whole of government center, she is the mother of this entire thing. She has put all of this on. I'm sure she has had many a sleepless night as well trying to do all of this, and it has gone off up to maybe this point without a hitch. So can we give Colleen, or can we give Kay a round of applause as well? Amazing. So we have Undersecretary Nuland from the Department of State. She is the Undersecretary for Political Affairs. Undersecretary Nuland, thank you so much for joining us today. And I wonder if you might start us off by giving us a little bit of an idea of what drew you to a career in the diplomatic service, and along the way, were there mentors or people that gave you professional guidance that you really valued?
Well, thank you, Erin. Thank you, NATO NICS, for taking time out of your busy lives to care about our great alliance. Thanks to William & Mary, and of course, thanks to the NATO organizers as well. I have to tell you, as somebody who served 6 years at NATO, including during September 11th, 2001, it makes me happy that the next generation is coming up and cares and wants to learn more, not only about the alliance, but about diplomacy. To your question, Erin, my gateway drug to diplomacy was Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. I fell in love reading fiction as a middle schooler. I got really interested in all things Russian, learned some language. And then I went to college and I had this highly Cold War-ish professor who essentially said that the reason the then Soviet Union was such a difficult country was because there was something in the Russian DNA. And after reading Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, that just didn't sit with me, that there was a whole group of humans that were born with different DNA than the rest of us and predisposed. So I started learning a little bit more and really wanted to come in and work with the Soviet Union and learn more about whether the US and then the Soviet Union, later Russia, could do better working together on this planet, and then became interested in all of it. So, and it being the State Department, I came in speaking pretty good Russian, and so they decided to send me to China. So, you know, that also served me well because I've had both experiences and lived in both countries. So that was how it started for me. I got passionate about some beautiful fiction.
Amazing. Thank you so much. As you mentioned, you have been involved with NATO through quite trying times. So I wonder if you might describe for us the critical nature of U.S. strategic partnerships and alliances, and then focusing on NATO, how the relationship between NATO and the United States has evolved over time.
Well, first of all, I think one of the most exciting things about NATO that's not well understood is that NATO itself has evolved over time. When I first started going to NATO at the beginning of my career 35 years ago, there were 16 members and the table was really quite small. And then there were 19, and then there were 21, and then there were 25, and it just has kept growing. But under all circumstances, when you sit at that round table, and it always is a round table, because whether you're Luxembourg with 600,000 people or whether you're the United States with 350 million and growing, we're all equal at that table as democracies trying to not only defend ourselves, but advance security around the world. And so it does feel like a family. It feels like a family that's trying to tackle global problems, that's trying to strengthen the democratic underpinnings of the rule of law and support the UN Charter, et cetera. And in every generation, there have been different challenges, you know, whether it was the Suez Canal or whether it was throughout my lifetime, first the Balkan Wars, then the Afghanistan challenge, and now Ukraine. And NATO has adapted, both in terms of the tools that it has, obviously its standing military and its strong political voice, but also its ability to train other militaries, its ability to provide mentoring support for countries like Ukraine, countries like Afghanistan, before the Taliban came back, of course, countries like Iraq. And that makes it a living entity. So it's a lot of fun to work there, constantly trying to hear other countries, find that middle. And when we're together, we're so strong out there in the world. So that's been a lot of fun. I think there was a broader piece to your question, but I'm going to let you ask it again.
To describe the critical nature of the U.S.'s strategic partnerships and alliance, generally speaking, obviously a little bit of a focus on NATO at the end, but just generally, can you describe, or what in your estimation is the critical nature of the U.S.'s strategic partnerships and alliances?
Well, just compare our situation to that of Russia and China, who have no long-term abiding friends, except maybe the frenemy relationship between them, or the ambivalent relationship between them, let's put it that way. But the United States, when we are at our best, never has to go out into the world alone to tackle any challenge, whether it is COVID or whether it is responding to Russia's brutal war in Ukraine, or whether it was that moment after September 11th when we were hit here and we instantly had, in those days, I think it was 21 friends at our side. So as I said, we are stronger when we work together. We, with other countries, bring different skills, different tools to the table. But most importantly, when you have 31, we hope soon 32 countries, all rowing in the same direction, that makes far better effect, whether it is what we're doing now to help Ukraine, supporting its counteroffensive, getting ready to help rebuild, provide long-term economic and rebuilding support to Ukraine, whether it is what we are doing in terms of promoting democratic values, et cetera, around the world. We are far stronger together. So take that as one example. Take another example, the new Asian Quad that President Biden initiated with Japan, Australia, and India, countries that had not traditionally worked together, but that share an interest in ensuring that the Indo-Pacific region, and particularly the Taiwan Straits, remain open and free, and that traffic across in the Pacific is based on, again, UN Charter principles of individual sovereignty of nations, but open and free management of global spaces. And so now we 4 countries are working together on everything from maritime security to climate challenges in that part of the world, to dealing with disinformation and other things that might come at us. And that's a grouping that hadn't worked together. But again, we are stronger when we pool our efforts.
Amazing. Since this is a youth summit, I wonder if you might tell us what issues are important to NATO youth delegates in your estimation, and how can young people use their relationships and networks to motivate and inspire other young people to get involved?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, I hope that as folks who are interested in international relations, you'll develop some area expertise, get some language skills. You know, I don't think these 2 big disruptors, whether it's China or Russia, are going away. So learning about them, staying up with current events is important. It's also important to understand some of the global institutions and how they work. So you're studying NATO, you also need to understand the UN system, both the UN Security Council and the General Assembly. It's good to understand some of the financial institutions, like how the World Bank works, what it can do, what it can't do to help countries, the International Monetary Fund, these kinds of things. So, and then digging into any issue that interests you. If you want to become literate on the global conversation around climate and what happens at the climate global summits that happen annually, or if you're interested in the Arctic, or if you're interested in development issues, to develop some expertise in a region and in functional areas is really, really important. And to stay current with what's going on, read the big thinkers as well as stay current, and challenge yourself to read people that you disagree with or listen to them and think about how you would debate, whether there's anything positive you can take from those arguments. Keep your mind flexible, because you never know where the good ideas are going to come from. And then, of course, one of the great challenges that your generation will have to manage is the increasing impact of AI, of quantum, of things like ChatGPT and artificial intelligence being able to create, you know, robots that can go to war without humans, those kinds of things. Do we need some global norms, some global standards to protect ourselves so that we can use artificial intelligence for good, but protect against any abuses or protect against some of the ways that the countries that disagree with us, the autocrats, might choose to use it for surveillance, for spreading of centralized control, for intimidation, et cetera, or for advancing in security terms beyond where they are now. So there's a lot out there to chew on, and there are issues that you all will deal with in your lifetime that are just beginning to show their green shoots now for folks in my generation.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So for those of you in the room, we're going to do a very familiar song and dance. So if you would like to ask the Undersecretary a question, you may line up at the microphone to my left. I'm going to alternate between questions coming in from online and questions here in person. So we will go ahead and start here in person. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Thrav Parikh, and I'm here from GMU. My question is about how do you still engage with bad actors despite them being a part of the diplomatic system and using every play in the book, obstructing real business, like, you know, using pocket vetoes just to prevent themselves from being shown in an embarrassing light or being held accountable? How do you still build trust with them going forward? Because, as you said, they're not going anywhere. They're here.
Well, I've had the honor in a lot of my diplomatic career of working with complicated countries, negotiating with Putin's negotiators, for example, when I was in the European Bureau, and now. Look, the point of talking is to try to see if you can close the gap in your respective perceptions, or if you can find a way forward that both sides see as mutually beneficial. So sometimes there are just insurmountable issues, like, we believe that countries should be run by the people and their elected representatives. Autocracies believe that that is too messy and that there should be a hybrid collection of leaders who should call the shots. But I don't think there's a leader around this planet who doesn't believe in his or her heart that they are acting in the best interest of their own people. So part of the diplomatic effort is to put yourself in their mindset, in their shoes, and see if you can't play their side of the chessboard. Well, you think we're being destabilizing in the following way. Here is why we're doing what we are doing. Here's how we perceive what you are doing as threatening to us. Is there a way that we can agree on some rules of the road here so we don't spark each other? It's not really that different than arguing with your sibling, if that makes sense, except at the end of the day, of course, we hope you love your sibling, but arguing with any individual human. So you have to listen really well and see if you can hear not just what they're saying, but the concerns and worries and fears and insecurities that are under what they are seeing, what they are saying, that is causing them to react the way they are and causing this lack of trust. So if you can begin to meet them where they are, even human to human, that can in fact sometimes build the kind of trust where they will take some risks and hold their hand out a little bit further than they would have otherwise, or try to do something collectively that might seem not obvious when you first started that conversation. And that's the great art of diplomacy, is to really try to meet that other guy or girl or country wherever they are, understand what's motivating them, see if you can find a common place to land, or at least some rules of the road that keep it from getting worse. And if you enjoy that human to human, you're going to really enjoy.
Oh, so close. We almost made it, you guys.
Guys, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we have you back.
Okay, so I don't know how much of that you heard or didn't hear, but.
And a follow-up question that comes from someone online, what is the difference in approach to diplomacy between China and Russia, speaking of those two nations?
I think it depends what you're working on. If you're in a room trying to work through difficult problems, both of them will usually start, their side will start with a long disquisition about all the things that you are doing wrong. And particularly if you're the guest, you need to wait, hear all those aspects, and then try to respond in a comprehensive manner. So in that way, it's often very, very similar. I think in the Russian case, they are far more likely in the recent time, late Putin, I would call it, to just flat out deny when you confront them about a piece of behavior that they're involved in, that is something that they are doing. And so even if you're presenting clear proof, it's often a tactic to simply say, that's not us, we're not doing it. In the same way that Putin continues to call the war in Ukraine, his war in Ukraine, a special military operation, and to tell his people that. And that if they say it enough, that'll create the reality. In the Chinese case, I think it's far more that you will get a 1,000-year disquisition about why their current position is rooted in history, is rooted in an appropriate understanding of regional balance, why the US is a latecomer to the historic party and itself trying to upset the rules, if that makes sense. They take a very, very long view of history. Those are two differences that you will generally feel. In terms of dealing with countries around the world, the Chinese, as you know, through the Belt and Road Initiative, have come to lots of countries with big bags of cash, offering infrastructure projects, offering telecommunication solutions, offering to build ports and roads and this kind of thing. But the fine print of the contract is often not very beneficial to those countries. Everything from debt loads that are impossible to service, projects that if they go wrong, it's the host country's fault rather than China's fault. They use Chinese labor, this kind of thing. So you have to be really, really careful with that. The Russians under Putin in the current era tend more to blackmail. You know, you don't want to vote with us in the United Nations, well, we'll cut off your oil, or we'll cut off your weapons supply, et cetera. And some of these countries have 20, 30-year historic dependencies on Russia or the former Soviet Union. And so they're susceptible to that kind of blackmail, if that makes sense.
Awesome. We'll take another question from the room.
Hi, good afternoon, Undersecretary Nuland. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. My name is Nash English, and I'm a student at William & Mary. And my question is about working with NATO. So you talked about how working with NATO can feel like being part of a big family, but every family, including my own, has conflicts and strife, and it's not always happy sailing. So how did you, when you worked at NATO, deal with these potential strifes? Because even though we are allies, we don't always see eye to eye on every issue. And I guess to kind of go along with that, with new emerging technologies, AI, and growing disinformation, every country has a different way of approaching these issues within NATO. And do you think that this kind of differentiated approach can create problems and strain on NATO's ability to kind of act like a family, like you said?
Well, thanks, Nash. Like any family, if there is a will around the table to solve the problem, you just have to keep talking till you get to the solution that everybody can agree with. So that's the fundamental principle of NATO, that when you sign up, when you join up, not only do you get the Article 5 guarantee that folks will be there if you get into security trouble, you also are making a commitment that you're going to stay at the dinner table till everybody decides where they're going on vacation, to use the family metaphor, if that makes sense. And if you have to compromise, you'll compromise at the end. And what generally tends to happen with NATO is once you start to get a critical mass agreeing on something, then those who are standing outside of that consensus feel a little bit more pressure to be flexible. And sometimes, as in any diplomacy, you have to make that last concession to make them comfortable. You know, if the family's going on vacation and we've agreed on Italy, but we can't agree on Tuscany or Positano, maybe we're going to do, you know, if most people want to go to Tuscany, we're going to do 6 days in Tuscany and 2 in Positano, and that's the way it's going to end up. But fundamentally, you have to make that commitment to stay at the table for as long as it takes, because there's nothing that weakens NATO faster than disunity. And that's often what the disruptors are looking for. They're trying to sow strife among us. So that's the first thing. Your point on tech and AI was the point that I was trying to make, that right now there are no rules of the road around this stuff. And we are hopeful that we can get lots of the democracies around the table in the coming period to start talking about some of the rules and norms that we are all prepared to be bound by in order to ensure that it is not a chaotic, highly disruptive, highly dangerous result that we have. And generally, if the democratic countries can agree on norms, then it's up to the autocrats to decide if they're going to agree. And, you know, there are already huge cracks between us and the autocrats, and you see these countries using AI, using quantum already to surveil their own citizens, exporting that technology to other non-democratic governments who want to do the same. So, we need to get on with this work and set some standards and explain why this is better than than having no rules at all, and simply having a vacuum that is dangerous for everybody. And I hope that'll be the work of your generation. I don't think we're going to get it done in the next couple of years.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So a question coming in from online. Do you believe that the Russian-led Collective Security Treaty Organization will fall apart given the recent tensions in the organization, or will it endure the challenges it faces?
Well, I never answer crystal ball questions because I don't have a crystal ball. I will say that the Russian aspiration for the CSTO, and now the Chinese aspiration for the CSTO, that it would become NATO-like, has not hit the mark in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, particularly with regard to the Central Asian countries, we see them increasingly wanting security options, economic options that are not dependent on either of their great neighbors, the Russians or the Chinese. They want diversification, they want at least resilience. So for example, we are working on increasing infrastructure and trade routes by rail and by sea for the products of Kazakhstan and the other stans to come out through the Caspian, et cetera, so that they have alternatives and they don't have to cut a bargain with Russia or with China or with both just to survive. In terms of the way those countries are dealing with their own security, they're increasingly diversifying away from heavy dependence on Russia in particular, and not very interested in the offers that the Chinese are making. So, I think given that they have history, they have geographic proximity, the group may well persist as a forum, perhaps for airing grievances, perhaps for settling unsettled scores or unsettled bills, but I don't see it evolving into a unified bloc that either can act for collective good for themselves or for the larger world in the near future. There's just too much distrust between them, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Another question from the room. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, ma'am. My question has to do with American soft power around the globe. As we've seen unprecedented times in domestic politics and, with the rise of nationalism and the changes in human rights, as well as the near default on the debt recently. Have you seen this change at all, the effect that American soft power has globally? And is this something you see affecting soft power in the long term, or is this not something we have to worry about?
If you listen to President Biden talk about America as a democracy, or my boss, Secretary Blinken, they increasingly use the word humility in describing where all democracies have to start from, because none of us is perfect, and our own democracy has shown plenty of its warts and flaws over its history, but over its recent history as well. So I think if you go out there in the world and say, we've got it all right, you guys just do it our way, that's not going to sell. But if you go out there in the world and you say, we are working on our democracy, we're having an open debate about migration, about gun violence, anybody can criticize the president, we're going to have a very feisty, let's put it that way, presidential season, and all of that is legal in the United States, and we're protecting it. And when there are violent upheavals in our country, whether it's the Civil War or whether it's January 6th, we deal with it through the courts. We deal with it through, well, obviously with the Civil War wasn't through the courts, but we defend our democracy openly and transparently. And that's what we would hope for all countries. it works a lot better than simply saying, we're perfect, we've got it figured out. And this initiative that the president has launched, the Summit for Democracy, which we've now done 2 of, is all about the democracies coming together and sharing those aspects of their democracy that they're trying to improve, sharing best practices, whether it's on police issues or anti-corruption issues, or making sure judicial practices, judicial independence is protected. And that's exciting when the democracies can all admit that we've all got work to do and share in an open and humble way what we're doing. And that does differentiate ourselves, where you go to jail in China or Russia or North Korea or Iran for breathing any criticism of the sitting government. And so I think our soft power is strongest when citizens see around the world that, even as we're far from perfect, we're fighting for our democracy every day, and we're fighting for the rights of citizens to stand up and say what they think and work on improving it. Whereas in this alternative model, that is far from allowed. So I think soft power is not about having it all right. Soft power is about being open-minded to better solutions to make us stronger all around the world. And of course, about our amazing melting pot culture, which nobody else has got, and where we steal from the whole world and then put it back out there in the ether.
Amazing. So I'm going to take one more question from online, from a student at Howard. As a Black student at Howard interested in a career in foreign service, it is often said that this is a sphere that needs to be diversified. How have you contributed to this mission in your role as Undersecretary, and might you be able to expand on that need to diversify the foreign service sphere?
We are working on this really, really hard. I think you know that we have intake programs, particularly where we look for students from underrepresented populations, whether it is students of color, whether it's folks from the middle of the country and not from either seaboard, whether it's people from LGBTQI community, all the complexity and wonderfulness that is American society, because we're at our strongest again when our diplomats look and are representative of America. That said, we have to do a better job once people join us of mentoring and guiding and supporting people from diverse communities. We have to ensure that sometimes, when you go out there in the world and they're expecting a white 6'5" guy to be wearing America's t-shirt, and you look like me or you look like you, you're going to get a little bit of static, either on the streets of that country or sometimes being respected as a diplomat. That when our diplomats have those first encounters, that they understand how to square back their shoulders and start from the premise that you are wearing America's t-shirt, you are trusted by the President and Secretary of State to go out there and negotiate on our behalf, et cetera. And then, at different stages of career, people have different needs, and particularly for our African-American officers, they're getting recruited out from under us because, we get some of the best, and then we give them amazing experiences, and then the corporate world offers them 18 times the money. So part of it also is instilling in folks that, the service to your country piece is worth staying with us and worth helping make us better and more representative of America.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Folks, that is where we have to end that today. We are at time. Undersecretary Nuland, thank you so much for giving us your time today. If you all can help me in thanking her.